Thanks for joining me. My name is Friederike Ertmer, for the few of you that haven't met me yet. I'm a junior researcher at the Academische Werkplaats Cerelo VU and at the Department of Family and Educational Sciences. I'm gonna take you with me today through the pilot study I'm doing at the moment together with Anne Delacroix, Agnes Willeme, who's also here, and Carlos Schingel, who cannot be here, unfortunately. And this pilot is about caring together, learning together, and co-creating sustainable educational participation of clients and families with children with complex care needs. Oh, yeah. Let me first start by at the start how this idea got planted, started at the department was by a mother with a child with complex care needs, and she was also working at the department, teaching and researching, and she saw that students of educational sciences had way too little to no contact during their studies actually with their future clients, and she was a little bit worried about that. And she initiated that there would be meetings and that this idea would grow, and in the end it grew to a vacancy for a pilot project, this pilot project. And the only thing that was left was, or still needed, was a researcher who could do that pilot project. And that's where I come into play. And of course, I have my very own motivation to do that. First of all, you see me there in the photo. I'm the one in the wheelchair. So as a child, I was also a child with kind of complex care needs. I couldn't really walk and couldn't really do a lot of things peers of the same age could do. So I also had a lot of contact with health professionals and other professionals during my childhood and younger, teenage age. So that was one motivation, because in retrospective, I would have wanted a lot of things differently, or I wish that care professionals would have acted or talked maybe differently to me and my family than what happened. And my second reason for joining this project was that I also studied what's now called educational science. Back then was special education and teaching. And after my first year, I hadn't met any family, any child, any client I could possibly have later. So I really missed that link between the theory I learned at the university and what I would be do with that later. And that yeah, it struck me actually that it's still happening at universities a lot, that even now, because this is many years ago, of course, when I started my my education, that even now there's often only very few contact. So these are my this was my motivation to join this project, or is still my motivation. I already told you a little bit why we started this pilot, because the daily practice of the students now later is to work with clients, and it's very important for clients, for professionals, to have a good relationship, to work on shared goals. And for that, of course, empathy and understanding by professionals is needed. And for that, you need to have contact and build up contact and learn how to build up a relationship. And it's best you learn that already during your education. So we think client and student contact should be facilitated more in educational programs. The aim of our pilot is then also to investigate how clients and families with children with complex care needs can participate in the bachelor program of educational studies. That's where we start. And our research questions are: how can families with children with complex care needs and other clients participate sustainably in the bachelor program of educational sciences? Of course, we don't want this only to happen one time, but really want to integrate it in the program. And which learning outcomes for students can be achieved with which kind of client involvement. I'm going to tell you more about it, but there's various degrees of client involvement that can be done. Patient or client, now I'm using the word patient. You see there's also a lot of differences. For our students, I would use the word client, but medical education, of course, it's patients. And it's not very new. I read in the literature about it. I couldn't find anything on educational sciences, but could find more about patient involvement in medical education. And it's not very new. You see here, for example, William Osler, which was a medical educator, a Canadian medical educator in the early 1900s. He already said that for the junior student in medicine and surgery, it is a safe rule to have no teaching without a patient for a text, and the best teaching is that taught by a patient himself. So he already planted the seed, at least for medical education. And throughout the years, you saw also a shift from a more passive involvement to a more active involvement since the 1960s. So active involvement, which would mean that, for example, a patient is teaching medical students about, well, if there's something wrong about the body, how you would examine that, or a bit more active could be even that they're evaluating the performance of students, or that they're even grading the students together with the teacher. In the literature review I did, I found a lot of articles in medical education that were talking about patient involvement. And you see there that there's also a wide range of degree of patient involvement. A lot of universities have a little bit of, at least a little bit of patient involvement, but it's very, it's not always very systematic. And that's why in recent years, researchers proposed more and more models to categorize the involvement of patients for the curriculum makers to find out more about what they're actually doing with the patients. For our I'm using the word patient too much. For our pilot, we are also using models, and we base those models on our research questions. I'm gonna let you see that. So the first question was how we can make sure families participate sustainably in the program. And for that, we used the TOWLE taxonomy of patient involvement, which looks at the degree to which the patient is actively involved during the learning encounter. It also looks at the duration of the contact with the learner. It looks at the patient autonomy during the encounter. It looks at whether there was a training or not of the patient beforehand. It looks at the patient involvement in the planning of the encounter, but also in the curriculum. And it looks at the institutional commitment to patient involvement in education, which is also very important. This taxonomy by TOWLE and colleagues is actually a model composed of two other frameworks, which is the Cambridge framework that was developed by Spencer and colleagues, and the framework by TOWLE and colleagues. First of all, let me tell you about the Cambridge framework very briefly. That framework is a set of attributes of educational settings. So curriculum makers and teachers could reflect on the involvement of the patients and also on the learning of the students. So they're looking at so the patient characteristics, because of course we have very different sets of patients. A cancer patient is a different patient than a mental health patient. They look in how the patient is involved. Does the patient have a passive or a more active role? Is it a trained patient or untrained? So did the patient receive any training before the encounter or not? They look at what, the general, or is it a specific problem, and where the encounter happens. Is it in the community or is it in a hospital? And then the other framework is a ladder of patient involvement in curricular development and delivery. And that ranges, of course, like a ladder. It's a ladder. It starts from 0, so there's no involvement, and it ends at full partnership, which means that patients are really not only, for example, teaching something, but they're involved in the curriculum. They are thinking along with what should students actually learn. They're full partners of the educational program. Here you see the model again, the TOWLE taxonomy, real in a table, and there you see the different kind of degrees. There are 6 degrees, and the first is only paper-based or electronic, and now we're using no real papers anymore, mainly. So the patient is just a focus, but in a paper-based scenario. Then you have the second level as a standardized or volunteer patient in a clinical setting. So this is the teacher asks the patients, for example, to provide the history, the patient history to students. Then you have the third level where patients share their experience within a directed curriculum. So they're invited to share their experience, but the faculty plans the encounter. And then we have the fourth level where the patient is actually a teacher. So it's called the patient teacher. And the patient teacher is involved in teaching and evaluating the student as well. Then in the fifth level, you have also, again, a patient teacher, and then he or she is an equal partner in students' education, evaluation, and curriculum development. And the last one is the same as the level before, but you also have institutional policies that ensure the involvement in decision-making bodies within the education. So it's a bit more embedded than level 5. The other model we're going to use for our pilot is the CANMEDS, the Canadian Medical Education Directives for Specialists. And we're using that for the second question, which learning outcomes we can achieve with which kind of involvement. This model was developed by the Royal College in the 1990s, and it's a framework to improve the patient care by enhancing the training of students, and it defines all necessary competences which students, in this case medical students, should achieve during their education. This model was adjusted for well, not only our students, but special educational generalists, and the FU uses this model for the students in educational sciences to see whether, well, so students know and teachers know what competences students should achieve by the end of the study. That was all about the models I want to share, but I'm coming back on that later. But first of all, I want to take you a bit more through the pilot study, what the next steps were, and what methods we are using actually. Because we are for this study, we're applying methods from action research. That means that we are that participants or stakeholders are involved from the first stage of research, which happened as you remember, I told you in the beginning, the mother with a child with complex care needs planned that or had the initial idea to or saw the problem happening actually in real life. And she's in a project team, so she's still very much involved, of course, during this research. And that's a very for the ones who don't know action research, that's a very important characteristic of action research, that you involve the stakeholders during all the phases of your research. So it's not only the mother we are involving, but also we set up a think tank with other parents of children with complex care needs, and also special education generalists, and of course the project team members are in there as well to think along with the design and how to do the interviews and about the analysis and results. Then in action research, you go through a certain cycle where you see here. You start with the look phase where participants or the stakeholders define and describe the problem, which happened already. Then you go over to the think phase where it's about exploring and analyzing and interpreting the situation to your understanding. And then you go over to act, where you formulate together with all the stakeholders, you formulate solutions to the problem, you implement those solutions, and you evaluate. Well, that's the general cycle of action research. For our pilot, we are using a more adjusted action research cycle by eldering with the following phases: the orientation, the system exploration. I'm going to explain you later. Then comes the phase of sharing the first analysis with the stakeholders. Then comes the action plan, which is actually the co-creation, where you do that together with the stakeholders. The implementation of whatever you co-created, and the monitoring of the implementation and the evaluation. And I'm going to apply this now to our pilot, so you understand it a bit better, what it's all about. I've already done the orientation. This is the very start, of course, where I gathered informal knowledge. I talked to all kind of different people, not in interviews yet, but just in informal chats with my project team members, of course, with experienced experts, so people with disabilities or parents of children with disabilities, with other researchers, with other professionals in the field that are doing, that are working. I did, of course, do and read a lot of articles about the topic. I planned the research, I applied for ethical approval, and I set up a think tank where I already told you about it, to think along with the whole research and give feedback and also propose ideas, of course. Then in the system exploration, which is the data collection, I not only collected the data in interviews, but I also participated as a tutor in a course, communication skills for students, bachelor students, educational sciences, where already for the second year we involved parents of children with complex care needs. But I'm going to tell you more about this in depth later. We evaluated this experience by sending out surveys to parents, students, and tutors. And then I already started the interviews with other stakeholders. And well, you might be reading more about it soon in an interview in Advalvas, so keep your eyes open about that. After that follows the analysis. Of course, we're going to use directed content analysis by using the TOWLE taxonomy and Kahneman's competence model. And then we're going to share first analysis with the stakeholders, meet in focus groups, and make an action plan. Then comes the implementation and the evaluation. So our data collection I told you already I'm doing interviews, 3 different kind of interviews with parents or persons with disabilities, staff from educational sciences and professionals and students. And I've done most interviews in February, March, but I'm still doing interviews also now in April. And because of Corona, of course, they're all through Zoom. And so far I've done 16 with parents or of children or persons with disabilities, staff. I've talked to 4 people, and I've talked to 3 students that far. My next steps in this pilot are, well, finishing off the interviews when saturation is there. With the parents, for example, I've met that point already, but I still want to talk to professionals and students. Then do a further analysis, share the results in focus groups, and make an action plan. But I want to, of course, also share a few results of what already has happened with you, because I cannot share a lot about the pilot yet, with everything, maybe in the next presentation. But this one, I want to share more about the case study we've done, where well, quite spontaneously, I could participate as a tutor in that course, and we wanted to take this opportunity and see on a small scale, actually what can happen if parents are involved, if a real encounter between students and future clients can happen. So again, we want to learn about the experience of parents, students, and staff. And we want to also see what students can learn, what they think they learn, what the tutors think the students can learn, and what the parents themselves think students can learn from an encounter, from an involvement like that. For that, we used my own participation in it. I experienced it firsthand. The whole course with the students, and also the encounter with the parents and the students. We used also here the competence model for learning, and I sent out a survey evaluation after the course to parents, the students, and the tutors. I did an analysis, and a report has to follow. This course, for the ones who don't know, is for first-year students of educational sciences, and it's about communication skills, which is very important for your future work with clients. So first, students learn the theory about it, and they practice with each other in the seminars on a supervision of a tutor. And now, of course, it's all online. It has been online this year. Students send in a lot of videos also on their practice at home with other people. And by the end, in the last meeting, they have this real patient, real client encounter with a parent with a child with complex care needs, where they could actually practice what I've learned in a real situation. After that course, I sent out the survey, which had open-ended and multiple choice questions, and questions on a Likert scale from 1 to 10. I set out different surveys for the 3 different stakeholders, and in the end, 13 parents, which were all the parents that participated, filled in the survey. 25 students, which was well, by far not everybody, and 3 tutors filled in the survey. So let me tell you about what the results are for the parents, the students, and the tutors. I want to start with the parents. We asked them how they experienced the interview with the students, what they liked, what they disliked, and you see already on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 is, well, it was really bad, to 10 is really good. That most of it is between 7 and 10, and most of the parents actually gave it almost 50% a 9. So very positive experience. I have the quotes here in Dutch, and since you're all Dutch, you can also read it yourself. But I made a small summary in English as well. So you see that most of the parents are really positive about well, not only the experience with the students, but the whole encounter from the start with the FU coordinator to the well, they had a meeting where they got to know more about the course. And that was a very positive experience as well to the well to what what they could learn, the students, and what also they took out of this experience with their students. They said that students had very good questions, were really good, well prepared. They found that students were really interested as well, showed a lot of respect and motivation. Then we asked them what they thought students learned according to the parents. And here they said that they thought that students gained a lot of insight in or a real encounter, so in the real practice, how yeah, an interview could be later with the patient or client. They thought that they taught them a lot about the importance of the relationship between the professional and the client. That they taught them about emotions, or sometimes they expressed emotions, and which was a good learning moment. Emotions and problems, which was for most students still a very difficult situation. If a parent would suddenly cry, for example, yeah, they thought it was a very good learning moment for them, that it can happen and that it's not bad. It's actually might be good, because then you found a spot where you have to talk more about, maybe. They also found that students saw the importance of listening skills, really listening what the parent is talking about, and asking more questions following. They found that students were very involved in this encounter, and they taught them that as a professional you should be as open as possible and have as little as possible judgment. Actually, you shouldn't show it at all. We asked parents what they did, what they took home, take home message from the interview, or take home message, yeah, what they took home from the interview. Most of them were already really happy to share their story. It's a very, well, it's all their life, of course, to take care of a child with complex care needs, and yeah, to have a student in front of you that is very interested in it was a very positive experience. Also, they felt good about the fact that they could contribute to the education of the future professionals, and also to change views on the students' views on families with children with complex care needs, from pitying them to having more respect and actually see the resilience of those families as well. Then we asked them if they would like to participate more often in the education, and they, as you see, more than 90% said yes, and only a few said maybe. And that would be, we asked them also what they would like to do, and it was not only interviews like happened now, but also they would like to share their stories in lectures, or anything else that would be requested. So it was not so much that they would like to think about themselves what they would like to do, but more if the teacher would have an idea, would need something, then they would like to provide it. Now I want to go on what the students what the students said in the survey. We also asked them what the most memorable moment was for them in the whole course, communication skills. And then basically everybody said that the interview with the parent was the most memorable, most inspiring thing about this course, because it was a real encounter. It was spontaneous. there were real feelings involved. And others also said that they could actually practice the interview skills they were learning, because it's different to practice with a real parent and with among each other or with other people at home. We asked them what they've learned from the interview, and if they've learned something, then what it was. Well, you see already that most of them rated that with an 8, so that they definitely learned something. And students said that they got a better insight in what life is about with a child with complex care needs. That they also learned how to do an interview, to structure it, but also to hold it in the end with a parent, and to do that with the parent and not with another student. They also learned that being nervous is part of it, but you shouldn't be too nervous, because it's just real human beings in front of you, so it's okay to also make mistakes, and to dare and ask more questions. What I already told you, like when parents got a bit emotional, some students were really, really afraid and held back and didn't dare to actually ask any follow-up questions on that situation. And others learned that it also based on the feedback that parents gave afterwards, because we asked them to give feedback to the students, that it's good to ask further questions, even if it's uncomfortable, and the parent might be crying. That's what the students said they learned. And we asked them what the parent interview added to their study. And a lot of students said that they gained more confidence in okay, now we've learned a theory, we tried out the practice. If we do that more often, we can actually do it later once we are done studying. They gained insight in the practice. They got a lot of tips by the end. Parents gave feedback, but also tips: what is important, what to think about, what to watch out for. They learned what's important in being a good professional, and that that you should be flexible, because you can prepare. Like, all the students got a sheet with some information on the family beforehand, before the interview, to prepare the interview, of course. But you never know what in the end the parent's going to tell you, and what situation the parent is. Maybe it's a really bad day or it's a really good day. So all those kind of things can happen later in your profession as well, once you're working. So that was a very good learning moment. Then we asked them which competences, based on the competence model, they thought they learned. And you see, most of the students, of course, thought they were learning about the communication, 96%, and some others also said they were learning on professionalism and expert, being the educational expert. When we asked them how worthy they would rate this as of their growth as expert, and why, they said most of them gave it an 8, or at least it ranged between 6 and 10 even. So a very high rate. And because the reasons for that were because they were more enthusiastic about their study, but also about their profession, because they could now finally see what really meant, at least in the first encounter. They learned about the fact that the relationship between the patient and the client is really important. And they learned also that the client has a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, and that should not be forgotten. So that's a very basic skill also for your relationship, of course, that you have a more equal relationship. And since this course was about communication skills, I also learned that good communication skills are very important. When we asked them if they would like to collaborate more often with parents, you see that 56% says yes, very quite often, 40% only sometimes, And a few people say that they would like to have parents or other clients participate in each course. And they would like to learn more on how to create a good relationship, on how parents deal with certain problems. They would like to meet also, because now they met only one parent, they would like to meet more people, more parents with different kind of problems, disabilities, and how they can support clients later. We then asked them also if there was something else that made a difference on how they experienced it. And they said that emotions by the parents often created a difficult situations for situation for them. Also, a lot of students were very nervous because it was the first encounter, and then you also have all the other students next to you, watching you. So, and sometimes I felt like parents looked overly tired or something, so they had to watch out for their words. We asked the tutors, now only want to highlight a few questions. What resonated most with them was also here again the patient interview, but I also said that they were really surprised about the positive attitude in life parents have and the resilience, and that the students moved from slightly uninterested in the course to a very enthusiastic about it. We asked them about the advantages and disadvantages of having a real parent doing the interview. And also here, tutor said that there were mainly advantages because it was authentic, and they felt that students were more prepared than what they did before in the assignments with other students. One disadvantage they mentioned was that there was no control about the kind of parent you got in your group. It could be a parent that talks a lot, but it could be also one that is not so easy to talk to, which I think is it's also real life. You can get that, so it might not be that bad even. And then we asked them also what they thought students learned. Also here they said that they learned about life with a child with complex care needs, and that the parents are the experts of their child, that making mistakes is okay, it's human, that you cannot prepare 100%, and they got an insight into the skills they further have to develop. So they see, okay, what can I do now, and what do I have to practice more? And we asked them about important conditions for successful client involvement. And they said there is a difference between parents and students. So they said that there should be a preparation for parents before the course. Parents should also be very motivated. They should want to participate and have a message. There should be clear agreements, of course, for example, on privacy, like we recorded the meeting, that should be known beforehand, of course, and agreed on. There should be room for feedback, and there should be a kind of a client pool where there are a few clients that regularly participate, so also clients become better in their experience or in their participation. For the students, it was important to have a safe atmosphere, and to check with the students also on their preparation, to talk them through the etiquette. So what is okay to do, what is not okay. You have like a real parent in front of you. You should, well, basic things like greeting, but also like telling them your name and those kind of things. And you should be jumping in as a tutor if something goes really wrong. So my conclusion, or our conclusions on this case study, all stakeholders found this course very inspiring because mostly the client involvement was very authentic. And for clients, it was something good as well, because they could add something of value to the education. Parents felt that they could contribute and could also highlight things they would find very important in a care professional later on. Students benefited from real encounter, of course, because they could practice and see the value of the communication skills they just learned in the theory. They learned about life, of a child with complex care needs, and they learned that that they should take parents seriously as the expert of their child, and move away from pity to real interest and respect. And by the end, all stakeholders want further client involvement. Of course, there are also a few limitations to the study. Well, I told you in the beginning it was quite spontaneous. So, well, it was a bit less scientific maybe, because only a few weeks before we decided on doing that. You saw that the sample size of the stakeholders was quite different as well. It might have been better to have more students involved, because there were a lot more students than those 25 students, so maybe there would be a bit more of a difference. And of course, it's a case study, but we also looked only at one way of client involvement, which was very facilitated by the faculty, of course. So yeah, there are many more ways, as I told you already before. So there's more research needed in general, but also we are going to look more in depth in this pilot on this topic, of course. And I want to close it with that. Thank you for your attention.